Hello, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me. Today I'm going to be doing the mid-year freak out tag, which is basically a tag that has been on BookTube for years, and it's just a tag that you can kind of do mid-year to reflect on some of the books that you've already read that year, what you liked, maybe what you didn't like, and some books that you maybe are looking forward to reading in the rest of the year. I thought this would be a really fun tag to do because I've been seeing it everywhere. I'm a little bit late, to be honest. I'm filming this in August, so technically I'm only going to be talking about the books that I read up until the start of July because that's basically halfway through the year. So I'm not going to include any of the books that I read in July, but I am going to be talking about all the books that I read in the first 6 months of the year. So without further ado, let's get into the questions. The first question is the best book that you've read so far in 2025, and I honestly don't know. I think I've had 2 5-star reads this year. I've had Recursion and I've also had Book Lovers, and I absolutely adored both of those books. But I think at the moment I'd have to go with Book Lovers. Now this might change towards the end of the year, even just between those 2 books, and I'm also hoping I'm going to have a few more 5-star reads in the second half of the year. But at the moment, I'd probably go with Book Lovers, and I don't know if it's just because I read it a bit more recently, but I just absolutely loved that book. I really, really loved the romance between the 2 characters. I think it was definitely my favourite romance book that I've read so far, and I'm really, really keen to read more of Emily Henry's books because so far, every single one I've read I've absolutely loved, and I think Book Lovers is my favourite yet. So that is probably my favourite. For those of you who don't know, Book Lovers follows Nora, who is a literary agent, and she basically goes on this trip with her sister, and they go to this small town in the US, and they basically come up with this bucket list of all these small town tropes that they want to do. Like they want to save a local business, fall in love with a local, stroke a horse, spend a night in the stars, that sort of thing. They have this bucket list of very tropey small town romance things. And basically, whilst Nora is there, she bumps into someone that she knows who's a little bit of her rival, and you basically get to see how their relationship develops into quite a strong friendship, and then also later develops into a little bit more than that. And I just absolutely loved it. If you're looking for a romance book, I would definitely recommend it because I think it's my favourite one I've read so far. The next question is the best sequel that you've read so far this year. And I haven't actually read that many sequels, and to be honest, the 2 sequels that I have read, I really enjoyed both of them. I actually gave them both a 4.5 stars. So that was Heartstopper Volume 3, which is the 3rd graphic novel in the Heartstopper series, and also The Hawthorne Legacy, which is the 2nd book in the Inheritance Games trilogy. I think for this question I have to give it to The Hawthorne Legacy, just because I was absolutely addicted to it, and as much as I love the Heartstopper series, because they're graphic novels, sometimes it's a bit harder to kind of get fully invested in them. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love that series, but it's a bit difficult to compare it to an actual novel because graphic novels are kind of just in an entirely different lane. So I think I'm going to go for The Hawthorne Legacy for this one. This is basically the 2nd book in the Inheritance Games series, and if you haven't heard of the Inheritance Games series, it's basically about a teenager called Avery, and she basically is the sole inheritor of all this money from this multi-billionaire. And she has no connection to this billionaire. She doesn't know him at all, but she just gets called up and is basically told, you inherit virtually everything. He does have a couple of family members that inherit a little bit of money, but when I say a little bit, I mean 150 grand or 250 grand, where when you have billions of dollars, that really doesn't actually mean that much. So everyone's really confused why she's been chosen to inherit it. And it's basically a mystery thriller where you're trying to figure out why she's been chosen, and there's also a bit of a romance subplot because the billionaire who's passed away has 4 grandsons, and they're obviously all really interested by Avery to try to figure out why it is that she's taken their money, essentially. I really, really loved the 2nd book in this series. I just really liked how the plot developed. I liked how the stakes somehow got even higher. I really loved the romance subplot as well and how that developed onto the 2nd book. So yeah, I definitely say that's probably my favourite sequel that I've read so far this year, and I'm definitely keen to read the 3rd book in this series as well if I can, because I'm really loving the series, and if I can finish the 3rd book, then I will consider the trilogy completed. Now the next 2 questions are both about new releases, and I'm not really a big new release person. So for instance, the only new release I've actually read this year was Sunrise on the Reaping, and I did pre-order it, but usually I'm not very good at reading books the same year they came out, just because I'd rather wait for them to go on sale, and I don't really get book FOMO from reading a book a bit later than everyone else, and I'd rather kind of see a few reviews first to see if I'm going to like it. And also, I just have so many books that I need to read anyway. I kind of try to prioritize those rather than buying new books. However, I will tell you what the questions were. Question 3 is, what's a new release that's been released but you haven't actually read it yet and you're looking forward to reading it? And for this, I'd probably say Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I haven't purchased it, and I don't even know if I'm going to read it this year because I just have so many other books I want to read, but I'm definitely putting it as a priority for next year because I love Taylor Jenkins Reid. She's probably my favourite author, and I've really enjoyed pretty much every single book that I've read by her. So I really want to read Atmosphere, and I've heard really good things. From my understanding, it's basically about a woman who trains to be an astronaut and she goes on a space mission, and I believe there is a heavy romance element to it as well, and I also believe that it is a queer relationship. I believe it's 2 women, so I'm really keen to read that. It's definitely something I'm very interested in, and I just love Taylor Jenkins Reid writing. I think she's just an amazing writer, so good at writing characters, and I love how she makes all these books about these crazy careers and these crazy lives, and you just get to live vicariously through them. I absolutely love it. I loved that with Carrie Soto's back, it was all around tennis. I love that Evelyn Hugo was all around that celebrity status and Hollywood, and I'm really excited to read Atmosphere. I don't know if I'm going to get to it this year, but it's definitely on my TBR for next year, and I really want to prioritise it. And then the next question is, what is your most anticipated release for the second half of the year? And honestly, like I say, I just don't really pay attention to new releases. Half the time I don't even know about a new release until it actually comes out, and then I'm actually aware of it. So I'm not really that clued up on what is coming out in the second half of this year. Also, I feel like a lot of the new releases that I was semi-aware of all came out in the first half of the year, because a lot of the releases that I'm aware of are stuff like romance. And then, like I said, the Hunger Games prequel and Atmosphere, they both came out in the first half of the year. So I'm not actually sure what's coming out in the second half of the year. But if you have any recommendations, please do comment them down below, and I'll make sure I add them to my TBR for next year. Like I said, probably won't get to them this year, but as soon as they go on sale, I'll definitely be picking them up. Now back to some questions that I can answer. So the next question is, what was your biggest disappointment this year? And unfortunately, this has to go to The Wedding People for me. I've heard so much hype around this book, and I actually ended up DNFing it right at the start of the year. I think it just wasn't what I thought it was going to be, and I also didn't find it very funny. I don't know if it's meant to be funny or not, because it's a very serious topic, but everyone says, oh, it's quite heartwarming and, you know, it really makes you feel good. But honestly, I just didn't like any of the characters. I didn't find it very funny, and I just found it, I don't know, I just didn't connect to it at all, and I just DNF'd it. If you're not familiar with the book, it basically follows this woman who decides that she wants to end her life, and she decides to go to this really fancy hotel because that's where she wants to do it, because she's kind of like go out with a bang. And it turns out that at the hotel, there's actually this crazy wedding that is taking place, like a huge wedding with loads and loads of guests, loads of money. And she ends up bumping into the bride, and the bride basically tells her, no, don't kill yourself, like don't ruin my big weekend. And they basically strike up a little bit of a friendship, and the main character kind of get dragged into becoming part of this wedding and meeting all these people and getting dragged into it all. And yeah, I just didn't really enjoy it. I found it really depressing, understandably so. Obviously the topic of suicide is like very heavy, and also understandably, there are a lot of reasons why she wants to do this, so the kind of context behind it is also very depressing. However, I just didn't really connect to any of them. I didn't like the main character, I didn't like the bride, I didn't like the groom, I didn't like any of the characters in the book. And I think when you're kind of just trudging through a book like that and you don't really like anyone and you don't care, I was just like, you know what, I have free will. I can just DNF this, I can put it down, and I don't have to read it. So that's what I did, and for me, that's why it's kind of my biggest disappointment. I really thought I was going to like it. I actually spent full price on it, buying it on Kindle at the start of the year, because I treated myself to a few books at full price. And I'm so annoyed because I didn't like it. So I'm kind of like, oh, I wish I just waited for it to come in the sale, and then I could have just DNF'd it anyway and I would have only spent 99p, but instead I paid full price. Luckily, I haven't had that many disappointing books this year, so I can't really complain all too much. The next question is, what was your biggest surprise? And this one definitely has to go to Recursion for me, because I just absolutely loved this book. This was my first 5-star of the year, and I really didn't know what to expect from it because it's a sci-fi book. I mean, I would say it's more of a thriller. I think when I first was promoting it, I was like, it's a sci-fi, and it is. It has sci-fi elements. It's definitely not set in the real world, but it is more of a thriller in a sci-fi world sort of thing. You have these 2 timelines at the start where you're following a scientist who's on this kind of like rig in the middle of nowhere in the sea. She's doing a lot of research around memory loss. I can't remember exactly what it is, like how much you know early on, but you know that she's a scientist and she's doing this like really top secret work and she's getting paid a lot of money to do it. And then we have another timeline where we have this police officer called Barry, and he gets called to prevent someone from committing suicide because they're about to jump off a building, and they say it's because they can't live with these false memories. There's this whole pandemic going around about false memories where basically people have memories of things that have never happened. So people have memories of whole other lives, of husbands, of kids that don't exist and have never happened. And this woman is suffering from this syndrome and she decides to take her own life. And you're basically following those two plots until eventually they maybe come together. And I just absolutely love this book. The sci-fi element absolutely blew my mind. I haven't read any sci-fi, so I don't know if it's just because it was my first ever sci-fi and I just absolutely loved it. But what a good book to start my sci-fi journey on, honestly. I was so happy with it. I didn't go into it thinking I wasn't going to like it. Like, I thought I would like it. I'd heard good things about it, but like I said, I'd never really read sci-fi before, and I also don't really read that many thrillers, so I really wasn't sure what to expect, but I absolutely loved it, and I ended up rating it 5 stars, and I would say it's probably my second favourite book of the year. So yes, probably Recursion, because I just absolutely loved it and it just blew my mind. It was just one of those books where I just could not stop reading it, absolutely binged it, and I just loved it so much. The next question is, who is your favourite new author? And this can be a debut author or just someone who's new to you. And mine is a very classic author, very well-known author, but I'd honestly probably say Gillian Flynn, because this year I read Sharp Objects for the first time, and it's the first book I've read by her. I have watched the film Gone Girl, and I do have a copy of that, and I do plan on reading it. But this was my first time I'd ever actually read a Gillian Flynn book, and I absolutely loved it. I loved the creepy vibes, I loved the immersion, I loved the location. It was just a really eerie mystery, and I really liked the kind of darker tone to it. So I'm really keen to read more of her work. She wasn't really an author that was massively on my radar. Like I say, I have a copy of Gone Girl, so I guess she's kind of on my radar, but I feel like everyone's heard of that book. But I honestly hadn't really heard much about her other books, and now she's firmly on my radar, and I really want to look more into her other books because I just really like Sharp Objects. If you don't know what it's about, basically about a journalist who goes to her hometown to help try to uncover this mystery behind there's one dead girl and there's another girl missing, and her boss basically thinks it's going to be a double homicide. He thinks that maybe it's a serial killer, so he sends her out there, and she's basically doing some journalistic investigation to try to get down to the bottom as to who's committing these murders. And it was just really creepy, eerie, dark, and just so atmospheric. Very small town vibes, and I just really enjoyed it. And I definitely want to read more of her works because I just really liked the writing style, and I loved like the atmosphere and like the eerie tension that was just carried throughout the entire book. The next one is, who's your newest fictional crush? And this isn't going to be much of a surprise if you heard how much I loved Book Lovers earlier, but I have to go with Charlie from Book Lovers because he was just like the perfect man to me. I absolutely loved him. And I think that was honestly what made me love that romance book so much, is because I loved Nora and Charlie as a couple. I just loved the way they gelled together. I loved their banter. And yeah, he's definitely my favourite like male character that I've read this year. If you're the sort of person who likes acts of service and words of affirmation, you're going to love Charlie because he was just both of those to a T. And yeah, I just really loved him. I thought he was like very charming, very caring, and very attractive. So yes, I would definitely say he's my new fictional crush at the moment. And if you know any other like romance books where like the male main character kind of has similar tropes, please leave them down below because I need to read more of that. I absolutely loved it. Next question is, new favourite character? And for me, I would say this has to go to Cersei because I just absolutely loved her character. I actually only gave the book an 8 out of 10, which obviously is still a very good rating, but I just loved her as a character. I think she was like the heart and soul of that book, and I just really connected to her on like such a deep level, and I've really felt for her. Just everything about her for me was so likeable, and I loved seeing her journey. I loved how she grew. I loved that because it's Greek mythology, gods are immortal, so you really get to follow her through decades and decades, and I really felt like I got to know her so well throughout the book. book. So yeah, she's definitely my favourite character. And if you like strong female characters, I would definitely recommend checking that book out because I just absolutely loved her. The next question is a book that made you cry. And I probably would say Circe again for this one. There haven't actually been that many books that have made me cry, although I think I do cry at pretty much every book when I finish it, but I can't really remember many books that have like really made me cry. But I definitely remember crying during Circe because there's a particular scene, and if you've read it, it's really, really difficult to read, and it did make me cry because it's just really heartbreaking. There's actually quite a few heartbreaking instances in that book, so that was definitely one that like really made me cry because I also just loved her as a character, so it just really upset me when she was going through these things. I would definitely recommend this book. I just really love her, and her story was just so moving and powerful. On to the next question of a book that made me happy, and I was going to say Book Lovers again, but I was like, I can't keep saying Book Lovers, I need to move on. So I'm going to go with Heartstopper Volume 3 for this one because I just absolutely loved that book. That series is just such a joyful and safe and heartfelt series. I know it does get a bit darker and a bit more serious as the series goes on, so I know there are some heavier topics in the later books, but I've only read 3 books so far, okay? So they're very joyful, very heartfelt, and very warm. I love reading like queer stories, especially those that are young adult and youthful, because I think it's just so difficult to navigate those sorts of things even if you're straight, let alone if you're also queer. So I just really love the series. I feel like it's doing such good for queer representation, and I hope it's really normalizing having those sorts of relationships and having those conversations in the relationships. But yeah, I really, really love that series. I think it's doing a whole lot of good at the moment, and yeah, definitely a very feel-good series, and it just is like a warm hug. I love the characters, even just the side characters and the side plots and just the little things happening here and there. I just absolutely love it. You can't help but smile when you're reading it. The next question is, what's the prettiest book that you've bought this year? And honestly, I've been on a book buying ban and I've actually been very, very good. So I've only bought a handful of books. So instead, I'm going to show the prettiest book that I own, that I've read this year. And that has to be Circe again. I'm sorry, I know I keep going on about this book, okay, but this is the last one. But just look how gorgeous that is. I just absolutely love this book. This is definitely probably one of the prettiest books I own in general, and I was so glad I actually got to read it this year because I've had it on my shelf for ages and I was like, I really need to read it so that I can actually say that I've read it. But yeah, this is definitely by far the prettiest book that I've read this year, and probably one of the prettiest books that I own in general. So yeah, it has to go to Circe. I can't say anything else. And the final question is, what books do you still need to read this year? And honestly, I have loads. At the start of the year, I made a video called 25 books I want to read in 2025, which you can definitely check out if you want to. And I have made good progress. A couple of the books I've DNF'd, so I'm still kind of like ticking them off as I did try, but I'm just not going to read them this year. And then I've still got, I think, 11 books that I haven't even started that I need to read this year. I've got quite a few, and honestly, I don't know if I am going to get through them all. I think the ones that are kind of top priority is for the summer, I really want to read When in Rome and Funny Story because they're both romances and I've heard really good things about both of them and I think I will enjoy both of them, so I definitely want to try and get them done before the summer's done. A couple of other books I'd really love to get to is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. This is a book that I've had a physical copy of for years and I'd really love to get to it. On a similar vein, The Book Thief is also another book I'd really like to get to because I've had it on my Kindle for a couple of years now and I've been meaning to read it every single year because I've heard such good things and I just haven't gotten around to it. So those two are definitely two more books I really want to get to. And then I would say probably the other two books that I really, really want to get to are, I really want to read Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine because again, I've heard so many good things about this book. This is a book that's been around for years. I've heard really good things and I do think I'll really like it. And then I also really want to read Talking at Night by Claire Daverley because everyone says that this is a little bit similar to Normal People. If you like those kind of like stories about people coming in and out of each other's lives, you'll really like this. And I've read quite a few stories that kind of have that trope now and every time I absolutely love it. So I'd say those are at the moment probably the 6 books that I really, really want to read this year. Like I said, I've got 11 books left on my 25 to read in 2025. So there's still 5 more books that I should try to get to if I can, but I just don't know if I'm going to have the time. And there's also just other books I want to read. I find it so difficult where I'm a mood reader. I just want to read whatever I'm in the mood for. So coming up with TBRs and lists can be really difficult to actually stick to because sometimes I'm just not in the mood to read them. So it can be really challenging. I'm just going to read what I want to read. Like I said, I'm going to try to stick to my list as much as I can and try to prioritize them as the months go on. but I've also got book club books I need to read, and I do just have other books on my TBR that I really want to get to. And yeah, that is the end of this tag. I really hope you enjoyed getting to kind of like see what my favourite books were from this year so far. I've definitely had some really, really good reads. I'm really excited to see what else I end up reading in the second half of this year. I'm a little bit behind my reading goal at the moment. I think I'm like 2 books behind my reading goal, but I never really read that much in summer, and I'm really proud of myself that I've actually read a book every single month this year, because last year I actually didn't read anything for the whole of July, and even this year I actually only end up reading 1 book in July, so July is a bit of a cursed month for me. I'm excited to continue reading some summer reads for the next couple of months, and then when it kind of gets into late September, October, I will finally let go of summer and start some of my autumn reading. I'm really excited to see what else I end up reading. Definitely read a lot more in autumn, winter, so I think I'll probably bump my numbers up a little bit as the year goes on. I've had a really good reading year so far. Let me know what your favourite books have been so far this year, and if you want to answer any of the questions in this tag down below, or if you've got any similar opinions or opposing opinions, please leave them down below. And yeah, hopefully catch you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye!